Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week. This week, we're going to be looking at Chapter 10, which is all about commas. Yes, some of us are actually having a difficult time with commas, and it doesn't have to be that hard, but there are some pointers that can help you out in case it's a little bit difficult for you, and it could still be hard for a couple people. To be honest, I never really like to use commas either, and I didn't end up using commas until I got into my PhD program where my instructors were a little bit tougher on me because I was actually getting my doctorate degree. Both my programs, my DBA and my PhD, those instructors were really hard on me because I didn't like to use commas. So there were some pointers that I saw online. I'm going to share them with you today in this commas presentation PowerPoint. And also, if you're still having trouble, I would suggest that maybe you get the program like Grammarly to help you out. This is about commas. Learning objectives. Use commas correctly in a series, direct address, and parenthetical expressions. Use commas correctly in punctuating dates, time zones, addresses, geographic items, and positives. Use commas correctly in punctuating independent adjectives and with the adverb to. Use commas correctly in punctuating verbal phrases, prepositional phrases, independent clauses, introductory dependent clause is terminal dependent clauses, and essential non-essential clauses. Use commas correctly in punctuating abbreviations, degrees, professional titles, and numericals. Use commas correctly to indicate omitted words and contrasting statements, to separate repeated words for clarity, and with short quotations. Basic guidelines for using commas: series, direct address, parenthetical expressions, dates and time zones, addresses and geographic items, and appositives. Basic guidelines for using commas: series. Commas are used to separate 3 or more equally ranked elements in a series. Remember to place a serial comma before the conjunction that introduces the final item in a series. No commas are used when conjunctions join all the items in a series. Series of words. Example: Trevor is trying to determine whether Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram is most effective for marketing. The serial comma in the sentence precedes the word or. We have series of phrases. Example: the government is of the people, by the people, and for the people. The serial comma in the sentence precedes the word and. Series of causes. Example: Caroline Gezenchecker is the owner of Rich Quarry, is marketing manager, and Amy Ferrero is an executive assistant. The serial comma in this sentence precedes the word and. Repeated conjunctions. Example: the 3 most popular apps downloaded to mobile devices are Facebook and YouTube and Facebook Messenger. Basic guidelines for using commas. Direct address occurs when a person is being addressed or spoken to directly rather than being spoken about. Use commas to set off words and phrases of direct address. At the beginning of a sentence. Example: Jonathan, are you available to work overtime this weekend? A comma is placed after the word Jonathan. In the middle of a sentence. Example: are you members of the class of 2001 ready to go out and take on the world? A comma is placed after the phrase members of the class of 2001. At the end of the sentence. Example: we are happy to confirm your dinner reservation, sir. A comma is placed before the word sir. Parenthetical words, phrases, and clauses may be used to create transitions between thoughts. Some commonly used expressions are considered non-essential because they do not specifically answer questions: when, where, why, or how. As a result, however, needless to say, by the way, in addition, nevertheless, consequently, in conclusion, no doubt, finally, in fact, of course, for example, in the meantime, that is, fortunately, incidentally, and yes. Examples of parenthetical expressions. Parentheticals can appear at the beginning, in the end, or at the end of the sentence. At the beginning of a sentence. Example: yes, I can meet this deadline. A comma is placed after the word yes. In the middle of a sentence. Example: we still will strive, needless to say, to satisfy our customer needs. Commas are placed before and after the phrase needless to say. At the end of a sentence. Example: you have been asked your supervisor about this, no doubt. A comma is placed before the phrase no doubt. Example parenthetical expressions. If the words resembling parenthetical expressions are essential for sentence clarity, do not set them off with commas. Example, however the vote goes, we will abide by the result. No commas needed after the word however. Dates. When dates contain more than one element, use commas to set off the second and following elements. Examples. On March 2nd, we opened for business. Commas are not required when the date is represented by one element. On March 2nd, 2016, we opened for business. Commas are set off the second element, 2016. On Thursday, March 2nd, 2017, Snapchat started selling its stock to the public. Commas set off the second element, March 2nd, and the third element, 2017. In July 2017, investors saw the stock price fall below the IPO price. Commas are not used when only the month and the year are mentioned. Time zones. Use commas to set off time zones used with clock times. Examples. Our flight leaves Oklahoma City at 7:40 a.m. CST and arrives in Boise at 1:16 MST. He placed his online bid at 6:38 p.m. PST, which was 2 minutes before the auction closed. On August 21st, 2017, a total solar eclipse occurred at 2:25 p.m. EST. Addresses. When addresses are written in sentence form, separate the parts of the address with commas. Do not place a comma between the state and zip code. Example, please send a copy of your passport to Edward Piazza, Classic Journeys, 7855 Ivanhoe Avenue, Suite 220, La Jolla, California, 92037, comma, before your trip. You see how the commas are placed there between the state and the zip code. We have a comma placed after the street, after the suite number, after the city, and after the zip code. We also use commas in geographic items. To use commas to set off a state when it follows the name of a city. Example, in 1966, the Braves basketball team moved to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, to Atlanta, Georgia. Commas are also used to set off the name of a country when followed by the name of the city. Example, the 17-hour Qatar Airways flight to Auckland, New Zealand, to Doha, Qatar is the longest non-stop flight in the world. Positives. Rename, describe, or explain preceding pronouns and nouns. Example, Ivan Spigal, founder of Snapchat, will speak to the group of business students next week. Commas set off the positives founder of Snapchat. When the positive is needed to identify the noun or pronoun referred to earlier in the sentence, do not set it off with commas. Example, the founder of Snapchat, Ivan Spigal, will speak to a group of business students next week. Commas are not used to set off the positive Ivan Spigal. One-word positives do not require commas. Example, my supervisor, Doug, wasn't in the office today. Commas are not used to set off the positive Doug. Special guidelines for using commas. Independent adjectives, the adverb to, introductory verbal phrases, prepositional phrases, independent clauses, introductory dependent clauses, terminal dependent clauses, essential and non-essential clauses. Independent adjectives. Use a comma to separate two or more adjectives that equally modify or describe a noun. Examples. Small businesses should strive to create a professional, captivating presence on social media. The adjectives professional and captivating are separated by a comma. We are looking for industrious, ambitious person to hire. The adjectives industrious and ambitious are separated by a comma. Adverb to. When the adverb to is used to mean also and appear at the end of a sentence or clause, omit the preceding comma. Examples. If you believe in this cause too, consider making a donation. The adverb to is located at the end of the clause, therefore no comma precedes it. Many celebrities support our cause too. The adverb to is located at the end of the sentence, therefore no comma precedes it. You too can make a real difference in developing nations. When the adverb to is located elsewhere in the sentence, it is set off by commas. When the adverb to is used to mean excessively, Do not set it off with commas. Example, some people share too much information on social media sites. Introductory verbal phrases. Verbals are verbs that act as other parts of speech in a sentence, usually as nouns, adjectives, or adverbs. Verbal phrases are verbals plus any of their objects, complements, or modifiers. Indefinite phrase, to plus the present tense of a verb. Participle phrase, verb ending in ing or ed or other ending for irregular verbs acting as adjective. Run phrase, verb ending in ing acting as a noun. Infinitive and verbal phrases that precede main clauses are followed by commas. Prepositional phrases containing verb forms are also followed by commas. Examples: to prepare you for an interview, research the target company. A comma follows an infinitive verbal phrase to prepare for interview. Working overtime, we completed the product before the deadline. A comma follows a participle verb phrase, working overtime. By enrolling early, you will receive a special discount. A comma following the prepositional phrase, by enrolling early. Grunt verbal phrase is not followed by commas. Example, eating raw fish is not my idea of fun. The grunt verbal phrase, eating raw fish, is not set off by a comma. Prepositional phrases consist of a preposition followed by an object of a preposition, which is a noun or pronoun. Example, on December 12th of each year, Krispy Kreme gives a dozen donuts free with the purchase of a dozen. A comma follows a preposition on December 12th each year. Introductory prepositional phrases of the 3 or fewer words require no commas. Example, in 2014, vinyl records made a huge comeback. The preposition in 2014 does not require a comma. Do not use commas to set off internal prepositional phrases. Example, the research development team in our Chicago office has discovered a new diabetes drug. No commas are needed around the prepositional phrase in our Chicago office, as essential and does not interrupt the flow of the sentence. When contributing conjunctions join independent clauses, use a comma before the coordinating conjunction. When short clauses up to 13 words are joined by conjunction and omitting the comma is optional. Example, the Washington Post publishes about 1,200 new items daily, and the New York Times publishes about 500 pieces of content each day. Do not use commas when coordinating conjunctions join compound verbs, objects, or phrases in one independent clause. Example, we are delighted that you purchased your new vehicle from our dealership and look forward to servicing it for you. No comma is needed because of the coordinating function. Example that no comma is needed because the coordinating conjunction and joins the compound phrases of a single independent clause. We have introductory dependent clauses. Independent clauses that precede independent clauses are followed by commas. Example, when you have time, please proofread the report for me. A comma is placed after the dependent clause when you have time. If you have questions, please call me at extension 2306. A comma is placed after the dependent clause if you have any questions. Because oil prices fell, the stock market experienced a decline in value. A comma is placed after the dependent because oil prices fell. Terminal independent clauses. Use a comma before a dependent clause at the end of the sentence only if the clause adds non-essential information. Information is considered essential if it answers the following questions in such as when, why, how. Examples, you may call me at extension 2306 if you have questions. The terminal clauses, if you have questions, contains essential information. Therefore, no commas are used in this sentence. Please proofread this report for me when you have time. The terminal clause, when you have time, contains essential information. Therefore, no commas are used in this sentence. Essential and non-essential clauses. Use commas to set off non-essential clauses. Example, State universities, as you will surely agree, must try to keep tuition costs down. Commas are added before and after the clause, as you will surely agree, because it's not an essential clause. Do not use commas to set off clauses that contain essential information. Example, an entrepreneur plans to open a small business should use the resources provided by Small Business Administration. The clause who plans to open a small business is essential. Therefore, no commas are used in this sentence. Additional guidelines for using commas. Abbreviations. Degrees and professional titles, numericals, omitted words, contrasting statements, repeated words and clarity, and short quotations. We have abbreviations. The abbreviations junior and sir, which is JR for junior and SR for senior, and Roman numerals added to the person's name are not set off by commas unless the person chooses to include them. Examples, Attorney Harry Conrick Sr. is the father of the singer Harry Conrick Jr. Prince Albert II of Morocco is the son of Prince Rainier II and Grace Kelly. Set off abbreviations INC and LLP by commas only if the company's legal name includes the commas. Examples, Netflix INC now has subscribers in over 40 countries. The company's legal name includes a comma. Gotham Asset Management LLC engages in the value investing for the clients. The firm's legal name does not include a comma. Degrees and professional titles. Degrees and professional titles following individuals' names are set off by commas. Example, Melissa Holmes, MD, is a nationally recognized advocate for adolescent health. Shaquille O'Neal, PhD, is both an academic and hugely talented basketball player. Lisa Godbey Wood, ESQ, which is attorney, was the first female federal judge in the state of Georgia. John Parshner, RN, that's for registered nurse, we know, specializes in providing geriatric care. We know that MD is a medical doctor, PhD is a philosophy doctorate, doctor of philosophy. ESQ we know is for law, so you're attorney or lawyer, and then RN is a registered nurse. Numericals. Unrelated figures appearing side by side should be separated by commas. Examples, in 2022, 2.2 billion people around the globe will be social media users. On page 10, 2 illustrations show the wiring diagram. Numbers with more than 3 digits require commas when expressed in US format. Examples, 1,760, a comma is placed between a 1 and a 7. 47,950, a comma is placed between a 7 and 9. Numericals, slide 2 of 2. Calendar years, zip codes, telephone, cell numbers, house numbers, decimals, page numbers, serial numbers, metric numbers, social security numbers, policy numbers, and contrast numbers are written without commas. Examples, house number, 5411, Redfield Circle, page number, page 1036. Omitted words, use comma to show the omission of a word that's understood. Example, on February 1st, 2017, comma, the Dow Jones Industrial Average closed at 19,864.9, semicolon, on February 1st, comma, 2018, comma, 26, comma, 149.39. We have contrasting statements. Use commas to set off contrasting or opposing statements. Examples, we prefer to buy American, not foreign cars for our company's fleet. A contrasting statement is not foreign, is to set off by commas. The more he protests, the less we believe in him. The contrasting statement, the more he protests, is set off by a comma. Repeated words and clarity. Use commas to separate the words repeated for emphasis and words that may be misread if not separated. Examples, no matter what, you know you have our support. Without a comma, the sentence would be incorrectly read as no matter what you know. In business, time is money. People also say money is time, right? And without a comma, the sentence would be incorrectly reads in business time. Usually when we add a comma, that's usually a break. That's a time for us to get our breath if we're maybe in the middle of a sentence or some large statement. You can use it when you're making a list. Some of these basic uses, just a reminder, is use a comma to separate independent clauses, use a comma after introductory clause or phrase, use a comma between all items in a series, use commas to offset non-restrictive clauses, use commas to set off appositives, use commas to indicate direct address, use commas to set off direct quotations. Use commas with the dates, addresses, titles, and numbers. And that's exactly what we've been reviewing. Also, you can use them when you're doing short quotations. A quotation represents the exact words of a speaker or writer and is enclosed in quotation marks. Use a comma to separate a short quotation from the rest of the sentences. Use two commas if the quotation is divided into two parts. Examples. Lynn Truss says, there is never a dull moment in the world of punctuation. There's never a dull moment, comma, said Lynn Truss, comma, in the world of punctuation. We can see how they added those quotation marks around anything that is said. You put the quotation mark. So just to review this. Number one, we use a comma to separate independent clauses. Rule. Use a comma before a coordinating conjunction. And, but, yet, so, nor, for. When it joins two complete ideas, independent clauses. Examples could be, he walked down the street, comma, and then he turned the corner. Another way to use a comma is you can go shopping with me, comma, or you can go to the movie alone. Number two, we talked about using a comma after the introductory clause or phrase. Rule, use a comma after introductory clause or phrase. A comma tells the reader that the introductory clause or phrase has come to a close and that the main part of the sentence is about to begin. When Evan was ready to iron, his cat tripped on the cord. We could have a comma after iron, so it reads, when Evan was ready to iron, comma, his cat tripped on the cord. And that's when we would take a breather during the sentence when we read it. Near a small stream at the bottom of the canyon, comma, park rangers discovered a gold mine. The third way we use commas is a comma between the items in a series. Use a comma to separate each item in a series. A series is a group of 3 or more items having the same function and form in a sentence. 1. We bought apples, peaches, and bananas today. We would go back and add our comma after we bought apples, comma, peaches, comma, and bananas today. That's a series of words. Also a series of clauses. And Mary promised that she would be a good girl, comma, that she would not bite her brother, comma, and that she would not climb into the television. We also would use commas for series of phrases. The instructor looked through his briefcase, comma, through his desk, comma, and around the office for the lost grade book. Number 4, the fourth one we would use it for is use commas to set off non-restrictive clauses. Rule, use commas to enclose clauses not essential to the meaning of a sentence. These non-essential clauses are called non-restrictive. Clauses which are essential are called restrictive. Both restrictive and non-restrictive clauses may begin with a relative pronoun, such as who, whom, whose, that, and which. A relative pronoun refers to a noun or pronoun that precedes it. Examples of a non-restrictive one. Stephen Strom, comma, whose show you like, comma, will host a party next week. Non-restrictive. Don, comma, who spent the last 3 days fishing, comma, is back on the job again. And we have after fishing would be a comma. So it'd be John, comma, who spent the last 3 days fishing, comma, is back on the job again. Restrictive would be the gentleman who is standing by the fireplace is a well-known composer. No commas needed, just for non-restrictive. The fifth way we would use a comma we talked about is to set off the appositives. The appositive is a noun or noun phrase that renames a nearby noun. Appositives offer non-essential information. Non-restrictive appositives are set off with commas. Restrictive appositives are not. A positive would be Alexander Poe, comma, The Restoration poet, comma, is famous for his monologues. No positive. The poet is famous for his monologues. No commas needed. However, if it's a positive, you would use a comma. The New York Jets, comma, the underdogs, comma, surprisingly, everyone winning the Super Bowl. The sixth way we use comma we talked about is to indicate direct address. When a speaker in a sentence names the person to whom he is speaking, this addresses the audience is called direct address. Direct address is indicated by the use of the comma or the commas, depending on its placement within the sentence. Number one, I think, comma, John, comma, you're wrong. Number two, John, comma, I think you're wrong. I think you're wrong, comma, John. All those would have commas. The seventh way we use it is to use commas to set up direct quotations. A dialogue is a conversation between two or more people. If a speaker, not a listener, in the conversation is identified, his name or the noun or the pronoun used refer to the speaker, and the verb that refers to speaking are enclosed with commas. Mary said, comma, quotation, I like concert because the music is loud, quotation. Two, quotation, I dislike concert because the music is too loud, comma, she said. Another one way we could write it is quotation, I dislike concerts, comma, quotation, proclaim Mary, comma, because quotation, because the music is too loud, quotation. And the eighth way we use commas is with dates, addresses, titles, and numbers. Rules for dates. In dates, the year is set off from the rest of the sentence with a pair of commas. Example, on December 12th, comma, 1890, comma, orders were sent out for the rest of the Sitting Bull. Rules to address. The elements of an address or place name are separated by commas. A zip code, comma, however, comma is not preceded by a comma. Example, John Lennon was born in Liverpool, comma, England, comma, in 1940. Please send your letter to Greg Carvin at 708 Spring Street, comma, Washington, comma, Illinois, 61517. And then we have rules of titles. If a title follows a name, separate the title from the rest of the sentence with a pair of commas. Example, Sandra Bensky, comma, MD, comma, has been appointed to the board. We also have rules for numbers. In numbers more than 4 digits long, use the commas to separate the numbers into groups of 3, starting on the right. In numbers of 4 digits long, a comma is optional. Like 3,000, comma, or 3, comma, 500, which would be 3,500. Okay, that's it for today. See you next week.